All right, what's going on, guys? So this video is going to be pretty long. The main thing I'm going to be focusing on for this video is just the leveling experience for RuneScape and a lot of the skills in RuneScape and how I feel about, how you will level them, what the best methods are, and whether or not those methods are good for the game. So this video is going to be pretty long. It's going to cover all the skills. I'm not really going in any particular order. I was thinking of going, from top to bottom, left to right, but just this is being recorded after I did all of my talks, and as it turns out, sticking to that formula is pretty hard. So it's going to be in a random order, but the order is going to be in the description, so you can find the timestamps here. And yeah, let's get into it. So one of the big issues when it comes to leveling your combat skills in RuneScape 3 is that Necromancy is the only style that feels like they put any real thought into the level experience. Now, the optimal way to train your skills up until level 45, which, that's not most of the early level experience, but that's a pretty big chunk of it, is just going to Shattered Worlds on Legacy mode, which the fact that Legacy mode is optimal leaves a bit to be desired, but this is largely because at 45 you unlock your first, real AoE ability. It's kind of finicky to hit multiple enemies with Dragon Breath, but Chain is your first real AoE ability. Doesn't really do that much damage, but it doesn't do 0 damage, and it's just not really worth doing anything else until, you unlock Chain, and for range until you unlock Ricochet. One of the other issues as well is that a lot of the early stuff that you could kill that has a decent stat line just doesn't drop anything useful. Like the game, if you go on the wiki, for instance, and you look at a leveling guide, it'll tell you to kill, hill giants or ogres. And the reality is, if you're a main, nothing those things drop will ever matter. And if you're an iron, if getting 45 melee, 45 range, 45 magic, if that's not one of the very first things you're doing, you're just going to find a more efficient places to get those drops a little later. So that's one of the big issues, is that one, the original 3 combat styles, their leveling experience just kind of sucks. You don't have enough abilities that do meaningful things, and it's not very good, quite frankly. Once you get to the mid levels, you encounter a second issue where getting a decent weapon is relatively difficult depending on the style that you're using. So magic, we kind of get a get out of jail free card with the god stabs. This is, level 60 weapon. That's pretty good. Getting level 70 weapon is actually not easy, right? Because what do we get at level 70? We have Aram staff. I'm very fortunate that I got an Aram staff from Barrows. I got it on my 3rd chest or something. But, I have an Aram staff, but Crystal weapons requires roving elves. That's really high level. Blisterwood weapons, that's a Lord of Vampirium. Akrises, you need, insanely deep quest. Pennant Master Trident, that's from what? That's a Barbarian Assault. I don't know who's doing Barbarian Assault in 2025, but that's another story. It's really hard to get a high level weapon here. And then once we're at 75, Staff of Light, I think you need 91 Slayer to get Staff of Light. I could be wrong on that, by the way. My Slayer memory is pretty fuzzy. But yeah, as you get higher and higher level, it's just harder and harder to actually get a decent weapon. Chaotic Staff is actually relatively simple compared to a lot of this earlier stuff. I would argue that you could get a Chaotic Staff sooner than you could get a Staff of Light, for instance. But you could get to, a level 80 weapon across every style relatively quickly. And if you're lucky, you can get a level 87 weapon. But generally, getting this, mid to high level gear is really hard for these styles. Melee has a get out of jail free card where you can just craft it. And a melee, you have to get 88 smithing. That's non-negotiable for Death Guard for Necromancy. So because you have to get 88 smithing, at the very least, you'll be able to make your own a level 80 weapon kind of for free. But for ranged, if we look at the weaponry, you need a really high fletching levels to make any of this stuff. And then it gets to a certain point where how are you even getting this stuff anymore? Like a dragon two-hand crossbow, you need dragon limbs for that. Where are you getting dragon limbs? Elder shortbow, nice. You need 90 something slayer for that, or 90 something fletching for that. Like, you're never making that. Third age equipment, nice. Like, that's real. You know, a real person's getting third age equipment. Dark bow, you need really high slayer for that. You need 80 something slayer for that. And then again, you know, with crystal weapons, you need roving elves. It's just not easy to get these weapons, which makes it really hard to train these skills. You know, like, I'm 66 magic on this account, and I have my best in slot weapon up until 70. Once I get 70, I'm going to be a lot less interested in training this. Again, me personally, I have an Aram staff, so I'll be fine. But the other members of my group, like, I have an Invention and they don't. I can't give them my Aram staff. Now, Necromancy is the big exception from this, because Necromancy, you make all of your gear, you're heavily incentivized to get all of the, you know, levels for the other stats to make all of your gear. So it's kind of implied that if you're doing Necro, you're leveling all of your other stats. Whether or not that's fair is a different story. I think there are fair criticisms either way, but that's real, right? If you're getting 95 Necro, you're probably making at least level 80 of all these weapons. And, you know, well, level 80 armor. So given that, your damage is always keeping up with your level, and you know, you don't have to worry about gear because you're just making all of it. But beyond that, this is your best in slot gear, right? At level 70, the best thing that you could possibly have is the Death Guard. And not only that, Necro feels like, and you know, there isn't really science, quote unquote, behind this, because as you can see, my other levels are just, you know, they're quite a bit lower. But from the feedback I've gotten from other players, and then just from my own experience, Necro feels like it hits like 10 to 20 tiers above the other styles, at least in the early game. Like, if I could choose between having 80 melee stats, you know, 80 range, 80 magic, or 70 Necro, I'm picking 70 Necro like every time, and it's not close. Now, again, to be clear, I don't know if this is Necro's fault or if this is the other style's fault, but I think the reality is that the leveling experience for Necromancy is just way better. The leveling experience, you know, you have more abilities that do literally anything instead of just being a different version of hit this guy. And it's just, it feels like Necro is a more coherent leveling experience in mind. So that's the big issue with combat. Prayer is a part of combat, at least I would consider it a part of combat. I actually found prayer to be relatively non-offensive. If you're doing your wilderness events on regular group Iron Man, regular Iron Man, hardcore mains, if you're doing your wilderness events, you actually get quite a bit of prayer experience. So this 70 prayer, I have done 0 bone farming on this account. I have not farmed any bones. I've actually used quite a bit of bones for my souls grind for necromancy, and I still got 70 prayer for free, right? From all of the ashes, the wyvern bones. I did get like 200 dragon bones from a couple slayer tasks. It's really nice that for prayer, at least up until around 70, you know, assuming you have a couple months on your account, you don't really have to worry about where am I going to get prayer levels. If you want, also I got 70 because like I did King's Ransom, which is a very good quest to have. It's basically the soft caps, so to speak, for prayer, because getting from 70/75 to 95 is just, that's a monumental order. But getting this level of prayer was surprisingly straightforward and surprisingly easy. You know, again, to be clear, I did not farm any bones, any ashes for this. This is just all of the ashes, all of the bones I got from wilderness events. So if you're not a competitive Iron Man, do your wilderness events. They're really good for a variety of reasons, but mainly free prayer XP is really nice. Now, to be clear, all of the buyable skills, unless they have really weird requirements for irons, I'm not really going to have a lot to say about them, because the reality is that they're buyable. So on mains, you just make money and then they're all really fast. In my free-to-play guide, I talked about how, oh, it's actually not that hard to make an okay amount of money. Like a free-to-play player can make 10 mil an hour. So a lot of these skills aren't using, you know, that much money that fast. So I'm not really going to say that Herblore sucks to train on a main, because the reality, a lot of these potions are even profitable, right? I think like super prayers are not super prayers. I think super range potions right now are profitable. And then at the really high level, Vuln Bombs are usually profitable like half the year. Spiritual prayers can be really profitable. But yeah, I think Herblore and like all of the Bibles are generally okay, with a couple exceptions. But on main accounts, I'm not going to have any real complaints about the Bible skills. So just be aware of that. And then given that summoning is kind of a Bible and kind of a combat skill, Gathering Charms has always been the most annoying part of summoning. With the release of Archeology, that's just not a problem anymore. So in general, I don't have major issues with summoning, especially since Archeology in particular drops a lot of tertiary materials that you use for summoning. So I think the skill is just kind of boring now, especially because a lot of the good familiars you unlock are just really late into the tree. Like, I know, I want to say 64 or maybe 68 or something, you unlock ancient familiars. Oh no, you actually unlock them pretty early. You unlock them at 45. But like 50 is the first ancient familiar you care about. And then you basically don't care again until 90. Although Hellhound is really good, so you actually care about this as well. But yeah, like out of all the ancient familiars, you care until 50 and then you don't care again until 90. This probably needs some type of rebalance, but in general, I think summoning's fine. You know, War Tortoise early is really good. Terrorbird early is really good. Extra inventory space is really nice. When you don't have access to potions, it's just gonna be pretty difficult to, you know, sustain yourself. So having access to these familiars that carry any extra stuff is good. So yeah, that's pretty much it for combat. And, you know, obviously I had a little blurb about Bibles, so we're going to move into Bibles next. So the first non-combat skill we're going to talk about is smithing. Smithing is pretty straightforward. You just, whatever you unlock, you make that. Everything from a certain tier of smithing you can make from, you know, the instant you unlock the bars for that. So at one smithy, you can make all of the bronze stuff. So you just make whatever bronze thing is the most bars, which, you know, that's bronze plate bodies. And that's just pretty much true at every interval. At some point, I want to say at 50 is when making burial armor starts being worth it. So, you know, that's something to keep in mind. But generally, the smithing level experience is like super coherent. It makes sense. It's a little slow, maybe, but I don't think I would actually make any changes to smithing. And, you know, since mining is the attached skill to smithing, mining is really nice because you don't ever actually train mining. You essentially always get more experience mining the ore you need for smithing than you do for actually smithing it. So your mining should basically always outpace your smithing, except during the very beginning of the game. There's a quest you can do, I believe it's the Knight's Sword, that basically gets you to 30 smithing as soon as the game starts. So yeah, that's kind of the deal here, is that generally you're never training mining because there is no mining to train. If you're training smithing, your mining level will always be higher than your smithing level. So generally, I have no issues with these skills. I do think it takes a little long to get to the highest levels, but I don't actually know if that's real, like if there's any data to support that, or if that's just I did my mining and smithing grind basically all at once. This was, you know, 2-3 weeks of nonstop mining and smithing. So it's hard to say whether or not this is actually too slow, or if the speed is completely fine. So generally I don't have any issues with mining and smithing. I think the skill makes total sense. And I think that leveling skill is totally fine as well. Kind of in the same vein as smithing, I think that cooking in general is totally fine. The skill itself is pretty boring because you're only cooking all of the stuff that you're fishing, especially if you're an Iron Man. If you're not an Iron, you have access to wines, which I believe can be very fast, but generally just you don't have a lot of stuff to cook. It's just everything you fished and then a couple of pies for a couple of quests. I believe this is getting fixed where the food system in this game is going to be more akin to Black Desert, where you're going to have food buffs, and then which foods you're actually using is actually pretty important. So when that system gets implemented, then it'll be implemented. Consequently, I'm going to be a little bit nicer to cooking because I think, you know, if they said they're going to change it, who am I to keep telling them this skill sucks? But generally, in terms of actually leveling it, it's fine. There's no problem with leveling it. The skill's just kind of boring. Now, I was going to talk about the other processing skills, but I do think it's worth talking about fishing because I think fishing is one of the major problem skills in this game. In general, when you have a skill that has a progressive leveling experience, just meaning that as you level, you have a bunch of granular upgrades that you can make. In most games, as you unlock these new things, those just become the best thing for you to do. This is not true in RuneScape 3, and fishing is one of the key examples of it. If you look at any fishing guide, basically what it'll tell you to do is you're going to do crayfish from 1 to level 20. You're going to do fly fishing from 20 to 52 if you're an Iron Man, or I think 70 if you're not an Iron Man. You're going to do metamorphose fishing from 52 to 66 or 68. And then if you stop at 66, you're going to do Ghostly Soul to 68. And then at 68, it's up to you. Your options are deep sea fishing. So swarm fishing is, you know, it's AFK. You can do a Ghostly Soul. This is the most AFK since the spot doesn't move or despawn, but it's kind of slow. You can do, you know, the really high level methods with, there's the minigame for fishing. There's Fishing Frenzy. There's Fish Flingers. There's the waterfall fishing, you know, there's warble gongs. You have a lot of options at high level, but up until 68, where you actually have options, you do 3 things. You catch crayfish, you do fly fishing, and if you're an Iron Man, you do metamorphose fishing. This is a bad level experience. This is bad design. In general, what you want is in, you know, again, in the game with a progressive level experience, fishing herring should always be better than fishing crayfish. Now, a part of this isn't necessarily that sea bait fishing is actually worse than crayfish fishing. A part of this is you're only going to be fishing for 10-15 minutes, so why move? And that's fair. But the bigger issue is that all of this space between 20 and 70, it's not good design that the 20 spot is where you're going to sit all the way up until 70 if you're not an Iron. You know, if you're an Iron, you kind of have to go to Metamorphose because this is going to be your best food for quite a while. It's really hard to get access to, you know, consistently better food besides Desert Soul and Catfish. Those are just going to be your best options for quite a while. But the fact that bass fishing and lobster fishing, you know, and cave eel fishing and rainbow fish, the fact that this is all legitimately slower than fly fishing just doesn't make any sense. This, you know, in an ideal world, the curve here is more linear so that, you know, once you hit 40, if you decide, yeah, actually, I do want to do lobster fishing, doing that should always be better than fly fishing. You know, because prior to 40, fly fishing is just trout and salmon. That's a level 20 and level 30 fish. It is unclear why fishing a level 20 and level 30 fish from the same spot is not only a little bit better, but way better than lobster fishing. So this is something that I think should be changed because it doesn't make any sense if you're a new player where you get to level 40 and then you're actually making your experience worse by lobster fishing. This should never be the case, and this is the type of thing that because it's not intuitive, it'll turn away a new player from this game. So while I think the cooking experience is relatively intact, the fishing experience basically doesn't make any sense. It's fine, for the super efficient player, I didn't mind leveling fishing because it took me a couple of days to get to 68. But if you aren't, on your third or fourth account, and this is your first time playing and you're leveling a brand new account, this is just not going to make any sense. It's just going to be very confusing why, oh, I keep unlocking all this stuff and it's optimal for me to ignore it. That's something that I would like to see changed. Moving down the list, we have firemaking and construction and fletching. I would consider these all offshoots of woodcutting. Generally, I think construction is very well designed if you're going to be using the Fort 4 and 3 system. Fort 4 and 3 is a very good way of leveling your construction, and it's pretty organic. Generally, as you get a little bit stronger, you're going to access more buildings, and just by doing construction at the fort, you're just going to keep unlocking more and more stuff. This 67 construction, this is only doing fort construction. I have not done any other construction on this account. And I haven't, done any passive leveling to increase my construction level to hit certain breakpoints. This is exclusively building the fort. And I haven't done any of the mahogany buildings either. So I have, I've unlocked, I think 1, 2, 3 buildings I need to do with mahogany frames, potentially more than that. And I just haven't even started any of those. So who knows what my level will be then. But my guess is that once I actually build all this stuff, I'll probably be 70. And then guess what? I'll have a bunch of new stuff for me to do. So generally, I think construction is pretty well designed up until around 80 something or so. But again, that's pretty good. Having a very clean leveling experience up until, mid to high 80s, I'm not going to complain too much about that. Same thing with firemaking. Firemaking is just faster than woodcutting. This is probably on purpose because you need the logs for other stuff. So firemaking is just going to give you like 1.3x experience of woodcutting. So you need firemaking for certain quests. That's basically the only reason to ever do firemaking is for certain quests. But it's there and it's fast to level. So no real complaints there. Beyond that, we have fletching. I don't think fletching is that slow. The issue with fletching is that it feels like the tiers are offset here, where at level 40, we are unlocking maple, which, so like that's level 40 tree, but at level 40 fletching, we are fletching willow. That doesn't make that much sense. And, and then we start fletching maple at level 50, but then we unlock the Acacia wood box at level 50. So it feels like some of the earlier fletching stuff is offset, and it's just kind of weird. I don't think this is necessarily a bad leveling experience in terms of like how fast it's going. I think it's just a little bit counterintuitive that when I'm unlocking, the stuff I'm cutting from 50 woodcutting is not what I'm using at 50 fletching. It's what I'm using at 60 fletching or whatever. That just doesn't make the most sense to me, and it's something that potentially could get reworked. I don't know if it ever will, but that's something that at least would make the skill a little bit more intuitive. Again, from just a leveling experience, it's completely fine in terms of like the amount of XP you're getting, how fast it's going, how you gather all of your resources. That is fine, but actually leveling up, and if you're gathering all of your own materials, just feels kind of weird here. Now, woodcutting, in my opinion, is like the perfect skill. Because woodcutting is used for 3 other skills, this skill just feels so nice to level. Just like with construction, I have 74 woodcutting, and I have not cut a single log that I did not use. Every log that I've cut has gone into the other skills. This is really nice because it means that you're never really training woodcutting. You're just training your other skills, and your woodcutting is going to get trained regardless. This is really, really nice, and it feels really good to do woodcutting, especially with the hatchet update where, we have higher tier hatchets now. It just feels really good. There's nothing else to say about it. Like, I think woodcutting is one of the close to, if not perfect skills, given all the updates that they've done to it. This skill feels amazing to train because you're never really ever training it. You're just training your other skills. So for gathering skills, I would want them to be more like woodcutting. Mining is close. Mining just feels a little slow, but yeah, woodcutting is perfect. I have absolutely no complaints about woodcutting. Next, we're going to talk about Dungeoneering. A lot of people don't like this skill, and on a main account, this makes sense. I think one of the big issues with Dungeoneering is that you don't make any money from it. So when you're training a skill like Dungeoneering, what's happening is you're like, it's kind of outdated, but not really. Like necromancy not being a part of it is a little weird, but it's kind of outdated. But beyond that, I think the bigger issue is that you're not making any direct money from it. So in a game with very expensive bonds, and bonds are how you pay for membership, and just gear prices are really high, especially, you know, the top end gear, trading away making 40 or 50 mil an hour, or even higher, depending on the type of player you are, to making zero money and training Dungeoneering just feels kind of bad. I don't actually think the skill is inherently unenjoyable. I personally like Dungeoneering. I haven't been, you know, training on this account just because I've been doing other stuff. You can see I have a bunch of 80s. I just unlocked Invention. But in general, I actually don't really have any issues with Dungeoneering. I think if you want to incentivize more players to engage with Dungeoneering, so if we got more updates for the skill, then, you know, you would have some financial aspect to it where, hey, here's a 1-to-1 like tradable object that you can buy with tokens that you can sell for an okay amount of money. I think that type of thing would probably just make the skill not feel as lame for a lot of other players. Again, I think they're wrong for thinking it's lame, but that's just where the skill is and how people are interfacing with the skill. I don't think it's a bad skill. I think it's just, you know, I don't make any money, so this thing sucks. Next, we're going to talk about Archeology. I've said this many times in the past on my streams. I think Archeology is the best skill in the game. This is the most useful skill in the game because it impacts all of your other skills. I think for a gathering skill, the pacing on it is like perfect. The only issue with Archeology, well, there's two. The issue with Archeology is a minor one, but Gold Rune is a resource you unlock at level 20, and in order to get access to Gold Rune, you need to do the quest Defender of Varrock in order to get access to a Gold Rune cache. Defender of Varrock requires 50 in, I think, Hunter, Mining, Smithing, and Agility. That's not correct. I don't think a level 20 material should be locked behind a quest with 4 level 50 requirements. Technically 3, because your mining should always be higher than your smithing. So any mining requirement attached to a smithing requirement, just, you know, that's not real. But the fact that you have 4 level 50 requirements gating your access to a Gold Rune cache means that you need to spend a lot more time at some of these earlier spots because you just don't have a way of gathering Gold Rune. There probably needs to be a more accessible place to get Gold Rune. That's my first really, really big complaint, because luckily when I went to start Archeology, I already had all the quest requirements for Defender of Varrock, so I didn't have to do anything for this. But imagine if, you know, the first thing you do on a brand new account is Archeology, and like at level 20, you can't do the skill anymore because, you know, you have to farm Gold Rune. That's not okay. The other issue is that once you hit level 78, there's this weird bottleneck where there's nothing for you to do between 78 and 81. I'm assuming we're going to get new Archeology sites in the future, so hopefully we get something at, you know, 79 or 80 just to hold you over. But that's just a really weird bottleneck to be having that early in the game. This is the only bottleneck I've experienced so far in Archeology. There are a couple after that, but generally those are not real in the sense that, oh, you unlock the level 81 spot, and then like there's 4 spots we unlock at 81. First of all, that's insane. I don't know why that's like that. But beyond that, you know, you would unlock the level 83 spot, and then you do all the 83 stuff, and then, okay, well, I'm just going to do my Tower Competence now, or I'm just going to farm my highest spot now. That's not the same as, oh, I unlocked my level 78 spot, I finished everything there, I'm still level 78, and now I need to get like 600,000 experience. That's a little bit different, especially since 81 is so bloated. There's 4 things you unlock here. I don't think it would be that big of a deal to move down, Tailory Debris to 79 and Crucible Stance to 80. I can't think of a good reason for why we need 4 unlocks at 81. That's the only thing that I would change, though. That and the gold rune thing. Once you're getting into the mid to high 80s and 90s, you should have a pretty good idea of what you want to be doing with your skills. So I'm a lot less interested in, oh, the leveling experience isn't perfect and, I have to figure it out for a couple 100,000 experience. I just don't care as much. So yeah, those are the 2 issues I have with Archeology. This weird bottleneck before 81, and a gold rune being available at level 20, but you needing, 200 other levels to actually unlock this. That just seems like a weird miss, given how otherwise perfect I think the skill is. Okay, next, just to finish off this left column, we're going to talk about runecrafting. Generally, I think runecrafting is a little slow. That's the only real issue I have with it. Obviously, runecrafting is, incredibly useful because we need a lot of these runes, but it feels like runecrafting is like maybe 20 to 30% too slow. Because I know that max efficiency runecrafting on a regular account is like 400k XP per hour, although I know those rates are a lot different with the runic attuner or whatever. I've heard rates get really crazy with that, so that aside, that may just be, a very powerful method that I don't know anything about, because I'm almost 200 mil. But assuming you don't have that, which I would imagine most Iron Men don't, it feels like runecrafting is just a little bit too slow, and, not that it's too slow in a vacuum, but compared to all the other skills in the game, it just feels like you're doing runecrafting for a lot longer on all the other skills, and your level is just a little bit lower than it should be. So maybe like a 20 to 30% increase in the XP, at least for regular runecrafting, maybe not for runespan if you don't want the AFK to be that efficient. But yeah, I just think it seemed to be a little bit faster. Next up is agility. Agility is another one of those skills where it feels like there aren't that many places where you're supposed to go. And for a skill like agility, this probably isn't the worst. This is generally a skill where you want to go to an agility hub and then sit there for a certain amount of levels, and that makes sense. The issue, I think, is that for Iron Men, sit there for a certain amount of levels is a little weird, because you unlock Anachronia at 30, and then in all honesty you should probably stay at Anachronia until like 65, and then once you get 65 you do that until you get 80, and then you just summer pie the 85 full course and do that. That's 4 spots, and that's a little bit not good. That this entire skill takes place over basically 3 spots, because for agility, I think I did quests and circus to get to level 30. And that's it. So yeah, I would like to see a little bit more granular leveling experience, where it's fine if once you unlock Anachronia, this is like the only profitable method. So yeah, you just do Anachronia, at least the advanced course at 85. But before that, it feels like this should probably have a little bit more things where, okay, this is obviously best in slot. I know the Wilderness Agility course gets pretty quick at 75 with the Demonic Skull. So, that is an option. But yeah, it feels like some of these mid-tier methods, like maybe something in the 30s to 40s should be a little bit better. And maybe something in like the 50s to 60s should be a little bit better. But generally, I think this skill is fine. Maybe a little slow by modern RuneScape standard, but I think the skill is fine. A lot of people don't like it because it's click intensive and slow. That's fair. I think it's a fair reason to not like the skill. Next is Herblore. This skill sucks if you're an Iron Man. It's just gathering all of the potions to actually train this skill is just agony, doing all of the herbs and all of the secondary materials. So the optimal way to train this is to use your Jack of Trades aura every single day on Herblore, and then to ignore the skill. You do your Jack of Trades, you do your weekly Herby Werby, which I haven't done yet, but if you're curious, it is in Anachronia. Basically, you teleport to Anachronia and you run north through here, and you see where my mouse is. You just keep following this path north. You go up here, and then this is Herby Werby. It's not hard to get there. You can get there on day one of your account if you really wanted to, but generally, it's a little weird that it's so hard to gather large amounts of herbs in the early game, and it just kind of sucks to level this skill. We're going to talk about this again with Divination, but it feels like the optimal way to level Herblore is to kind of skip over the entire skill, and that feels wrong. Like, there's basically no useful potions you can make until, anti-fires are pretty useful, and then you need weapon poison for archaeology, but I have not had any desire to make any of these potions before the weapon poison. So the fact that the skill, if you're an iron, is effectively a dead skill until you're level 80, or until you're level 60 rather, is not good. That's not correct. Now, once you're a higher level player and, assuming you're training, you're farming, getting a large amount of herbs isn't as bad. But again, in the early game where it really, really matters, just the optimal way to engage with Herblore is to not train it. And that is not correct. That is never the best way to level skill, just from a user perspective. And when we talk about it again with Divination, you'll see why. Now, since we're talking about Divination, this is the worst skill in the game. It's not close. Training Divination by itself is pain. This skill is literally about a third as fast as it should be. And when I say as it should be, what I mean is at level 95 Divination, you get access to incandescent wisps. These, at max efficiency, are around 95 to 100k XP per hour. If we look at another skill, like Hunter, and we go to level 30, you see we have these things called gliding whirligigs. These, at max efficiency, are 300k XP per hour. Now, this could be an argument for gliding whirligigs being OP, and they probably are. Now, well, not probably. They almost certainly are. They're definitely broken, and they should probably be nerfed for how fast they are. I do not understand why Hunter gets a level 30 method that gives you 300k XP per hour at max efficiency, and Divination gets, their level 95 method is 105k XP per hour, or however much it is. Because of this, and because of how disgustingly slow this skill is, the optimal way to train Divination is to not train the skill. You are supposed to do the minigame Gathaxian Caches until level 60 to unlock Vibrant Wisps. You do Vibrant Wisps to make however many Sign of the Porters you want if you're an Iron Man. And then, you do that until 80 until you unlock Invention. Otherwise, if you're not an Iron, you just buy the Vibrant Wisps, and instead, you never interact with this skill a single time. This is the worst design skill in the game, and it's not close, and the XP for this skill probably needs to be 3 times higher than it is currently in order for it to be worth training a skill. Now, there are other things that you can do, right? Like this Hall of Memories, from what I've heard, I haven't used it myself, is a very good training method. And core parties, which is just people, or not core parties, but there are just divination places where you get constant enriched memories on the divination world. Those are very good for XP, but by very good, I mean, instead of getting, 100k XP at incandescent wisp, you're getting like 150k XP an hour. That's still worse than the level 30 hunter method. So it's just not a good skill. it's incredibly useful, and there's a lot of places to use divination. Leveling this skill is pain, and this skill sucks, and the XP needs to be at least doubled across the board in order for skipping this skill to not be optimal. Next, we're going to talk about Slayer. I don't have a lot to say about Slayer. This skill is basically perfect. I don't really have any issues with it. It would be nice if there were like more useful stuff to kill earlier on, but skill's fine. You do need 55 for Big Game Hunter, and Big Game Hunter is really sick. So this is something that, you know, feels bad if you're doing a lot of hunter training, that, you know, you get your 75 hunter and then, oh wait, I forgot I needed the Slayer level. That's a little bit annoying, but, you know, you'll get over it. Big Game Hunter is sick, so, you know, this is just a price that most people, I'd imagine, are willing to pay once you get access to Big Game Hunter. So yeah, I think Slayer is basically a perfect skill. I have no issues with this. It would be nice if there were more useful stuff in these lower levels, but Hunter, we already talked about how whirligigs are disgustingly broken, and these probably need to be nerfed. Besides that, this skill is just pretty fast, and because whirligigs exist, it has a very weird leveling curve where you do like random birds up until 30, and this is you know, maybe an hour, and then you do 30 to like 70, 75 at whirligigs. I think you upgrade which whirligig you do at 70, but you do that to 75, and then at 75 you just do Big Game Hunter if you're an iron until you have 2 Dragonmatics. And if you don't, then you know, you have a bunch of methods here that you could do. And high level hunter actually has quite a bit of discretion. But low level hunter, there is one thing you do. You unlock whirligigs and you sit there until you're high level hunter. Again, just like we talked about with fishing, is the battle level experience. This is something that I don't think is very fun or very intuitive. And it makes a lot of the early game of the skill feel useless. The fact that everything between 30 and 75 basically doesn't matter is just probably not correct. Like, why have all of the cool stuff in here if the optimal way of training the skill is to not do any of the cool stuff in here? It's just, it's not good design, and it's something that I would want to see these skills in the middle boosted a little bit, or whirligigs nuked from orbit. The XP that they give is completely broken, and like, it's just, I don't know why it's so high. Next, we'll talk about crafting. This skill is really painful if you're an Iron Man. If you're not an iron, crafting is fine because it's just a normal buyable, so you throw money at it and then it's fine. Same thing is true of our Herblore. They're just normal buyables. You do whatever the highest level method is, or you do whatever method you can afford. Like, gems are actually really fast if you're not iron, because, you know, as soon as you unlock, you know, rubies or diamonds, whatever, you're getting like 400k XP per hour. Really crazy XP per hour. The issue on an iron is that you have to gather all of the XP yourself. You need to gather all of the gems yourself. What this means is that from levels 1 to 20, what you are doing is usually clay. And then from 20 all the way to 75, arguably 80, arguably 85, it's cutting gems. And that's fine until like level 50 or 60. And then it stops being fine. Because just, again, we've talked about this before, as a leveling experience, this is agony. This is just the least fun in the entire world. Again, this is on an Iron Man, and it's an Iron Man only problem, but, you know, it's worth talking about. This is a horrible experience. But beyond that, I think the biggest thing to keep in mind here is that you have this entire processing skill that the whole thing is worthless, because everything is just worse than cutting gems. Anything in here that you can think of, it's just worse than cutting gems. Now, with crafting, you know, once you unlock Plague's End, you need to get, I want to say, 6,000 harmonic dust to, like, finish all of your level 100 weapons or whatever. Because, what, you need one for archaeology, one for woodcutting, one for mining. I think that's it. So you need 6,000 harmonic dust, which, you know, that's a couple days of this. But besides that, it's just so much harder to gather all of the resources to do these high-level mining methods, and even these mid-level mining methods down here. It's so much harder to do all these things than it is to just cut gems and gather gems. And then beyond that, even if there are other competitive methods, so for instance, there's a crafting method with Daemonheim where you just spend all of your money crafting the lowest level materials, you sell it back, rinse and repeat. Even that is just kind of worse than gem mining. And then another option that you can do is you can train your crafting at the Gate of Elidinus, which is the new skilling boss, except that requires 86 archaeology and 75 necro and 66 magic. So to get access to the not worst training method in the game, and worst as in just the least fun, you need to have 86 of another stat, which I like archaeology, so I don't mind doing this grind. If you don't like archaeology, this is horrible. I think the crafting level experience needs to have more stuff in the middle that's worth making, because the reality is that if this stuff isn't worth making, then you just have this terrible leveling skill. Like, it should be the case that if I get my hands on, a bunch of dragonhide, this should just be better than cutting gems. Like, if I wanted to gather blue dragonhide at 50 and then craft all of it, that process should get me the same or more experience as cutting gems. And the fact that it doesn't just means that why interact with this skill at all besides gem cutting. On an Iron Man, your crafting experience is making your necro armor and cutting gems until you unlock Prif. You get your 6,000 dust, and then you're probably doing gate. You're AFKing the entrance at gate to get, your higher crafting levels, and it feels bad. Like, it feels like a complete missed opportunity that from level 20 to 85, the whole skill just stops mattering and it just all becomes cutting gems. And that's just sad. Next, we're going to talk about thieving. This skill is just insanely fast. Yeah, this skill is really fast. That's pretty much all I have to say about it. It's probably too fast, given that I don't think this skill is as useful as some of the other slower methods. Like, the fact that thieving is like 800k XP per hour, like pushing towards the higher levels, and then divination's 105k XP per hour, it's just insane that thieving is that high. Now, I don't know if thieving needs to get nerfed. I don't think I would go that far, but this is just like, it's really insane how fast this XP is. So like, it's a good skill. It's fast to level. It's easy to level. It's a relatively engaging skill. It's just really, really fast. Which I guess is okay. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it more makes other skills feel bad than it itself feel super good. Like, I don't know. When I'm training thieving, I'm not like, damn, this skill goes so crazy. It's like, why is thieving so fast? And divination is just the worst skill in the entire game. Like, I don't understand. And finally, we have farming. This is a weird skill because farming, once you unlock player-owned farms, I think it's really awesome because it's entirely self-contained. It's basically a minigame, but you just get to get level 120 farming from this minigame and only engaging with this minigame, which is really awesome. The flip side of that is that, like, growing trees and growing plants and growing, well, you still have to grow herbs, but mostly growing trees and growing plants and growing mushrooms, if you are a main, is a complete waste of time. The XP is still there, but the reality is that leaving the farm is just kind of worse than not leaving the farm. So if I could get slightly better XP by engaging with the skill, or I can just do the minigame and still get really high XP. Like you can see here, farming is my highest skill, or my second highest skill, and I've only been doing player-owned farms. When that's the case, it just makes it hard to want to engage with the rest of the skill. Now you have to do herbs, especially if you're an iron, just because all the herb drops got changed to seed drops, so that's how we get herbs now. But yeah, it feels like the other half of farming, which was the whole skill before player on farms came out, is relatively neglected and underdeveloped, and I'm not super sure why that is. Maybe it's just because it's too far away from teleports, or maybe I'm just wrong and I'm engaging with the skill in a relatively lazy way. But yeah, like my group, no one's doing the other farming stuff, and we're barely doing seeds because it's actually really hard to get mid and high level seeds. If you're doing Slayer, it feels like you're not really getting these seeds until 70 plus. Like, I've been doing Slayer on this account this entire time. I have not gotten a single seed above Terramin. I think I've gotten an Iris seed once. But yeah, I'm 67 Slayer, haven't gotten a seed above Terramin. So that's not good. I would like to see the, original farming side of this be developed more. But yeah, it's just a little unfortunate that basically player on farms kind of usurped, the rest of the skill. And player on farms is awesome, and it's basically a perfect skill, but the rest of the skill is pretty bad. And it's kind of the same thing with construction that I forgot to talk about earlier, where like the player owned house is just trash. There's essentially no reason to build a house. The only reason to have a house is you need somewhere to make clockwork. So you need a crafting bench, and you need a place for, there's one other thing. I'm forgetting off the top of my head. I'm sure I'll remember this. Oh, you want a whetstone so you can repair your gear for cheaper. Those might even be in the same room. I'm not 100% sure. But the fact that you need 2 rooms max in your player-owned house and then the rest of the house can just be neglected feels like that part of the skill probably needs to be improved. I know that's a big overhaul. It's probably not going to get done, but yeah, just kind of sucks that for farming and construction, like the mini game part of the skill is basically super awesome and really fun, and then the rest of the skill just kind of blows, and that's not good. And then finally, we're going to talk about Invention. I just unlocked Invention on this account, and the first big bottleneck that I'm having is I can't make any augmenters because I can't get a large amount of enhancing components. Again, this is only a problem for irons, but I think more easily accessible stuff should maybe drop enhancing components, because I've had this skill unlocked for 4 days and I haven't been able to make a single augmenter. So I want there to be more ways to get, enhancing components. I can get strong components or powerful components, but yeah, this is mostly just me complaining. I don't think I have any real issue with the skill. I think the skill is fine. It's slow and linear with its leveling path, but that just kind of doesn't matter since you're never actively leveling the skill. You're pretty much always passively leveling it. So yeah, Invention's fine. Just more enhancing components, please. That's more or less my review of the early game leveling experience. I feel like there are a couple skills that have like really, really, really awesome leveling experiences. I think Slayer is really good. I think cooking is okay. I think woodcutting is amazing. I think construction is amazing. I think smithing and mining are pretty good. Mining is a little bit slow. But then there are skills that just have completely horrible experiences and like it's just not good. I think crafting and divination are just the worst skills to train in the game. Herblore would be one of the worst skills to train, except you don't actually ever train it. You just kind of level it for free. So yeah, that's leveling in RuneScape. Hopefully, some of the stuff gets changed in the near future. It would be nice if newer players just had a more uniform experience leveling their skills. I think the worst thing about the leveling experience is that how many of these skills are necessary. And it really sucks when someone does mining and smithing and they're like, okay, that felt pretty good. And then, they're a main, so crafting feels completely fine to them. Then they get to divination and then they just quit because it's like, damn, my mining and smithing took, however many weeks of AFKing, but at least the AFK. And the divination is like 2 months of not engaging with the skill and just doing the minigame twice a day. Like, but this is arguably one of the most important skills in the game because you need it to unlock Invention. That doesn't make any sense. if anything comes out of this, I hope that Divination gets a complete overhaul. And at the very least, this needs to be literally 2 or 3 times faster. But yeah, that's going to be it for this video. I know this was pretty long and a lot of talking and not that much gameplay, but I couldn't record this and play and be focused on what I'm saying at the same time. So yeah, my bad. But yeah, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.